Did you see that shit? MMA podcast. Hosted by mixed martial arts journalist Mike Strauss, aka Strauss21, and Chicago's #1 underground comedian, Apollo Taj Mahal.
Hey Mike,
What's up, bro?
did you see that shit?
What shit are you talking about?
UFC 222 has a new main event.
Yeah, you know, it is a featherweight main event, not the one we thought we were going to get. It's Cyborg versus Yana Kunitsaya. Now, the thing that's crazy about this is Kunitsaya is basically a bloated bantamweight fighter again. So here we are.
There's no 145 division.
No, there really isn't.
There really, you know what? I have the biggest issue. I have not seen one 145 women's division yet fight outside of a championship fight.
In the UFC?
Yeah,
I mean,
at all.
it's something else. Or, you know, already Cyborg is a 10-1 favorite, rightfully so. Kunitsaya, she's from Invicta. She has a win over Tanya Evinger, and then she has a loss from Evinger. So, you know, take it for what it is. Cyborg more than likely will run through her.
They need to build this division.
I don't think they will. I think she's gonna go bye-bye.
Man, I'm very sad. I really want this division built.
So, you know, at least they keep Frankie Edgar on the card, though, against Brian Ortega. It's the co-main event now, but I like this fight. I think Edgar is that guy that's going to turn Brian Ortega away. You don't, though.
No, I don't think Brian Ortega is necessarily going to beat Frankie Edgar. I think it's just going to be a lot more competitive of a fight to the point where it will actually be a win-win for both.
Yeah, you know, it might be. That's a good point. I do think there are instances when fights are win-wins, and this could be one of those.
You're
right.
I think it's like the Junior Dos Santos Stipe fight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really believe anybody lost that fight. It was great for both parties.
Yeah, every now and then, man, that does happen. If you haven't figured it out yet, you are listening to the Did You See That Shit Mixed Martial Arts podcast. I am mixed martial arts journalist Mike Strauss, and I'm alongside the one and only Chicago's #1 underground comedian Apollo Taj Mahal.
What's poppin', people?
If you guys want to get in on the conversation, give us a call, 708-669-4777. Give me an email, mike@didyousee.shit.com. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all the social media platforms, guys, at DYSTSP. And there's an underscore in between each of those. So it's really easy, though. Just Did You See That Shit podcast. Also, go to our website, didyousee.shit.com. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, all the above. So
we're so fancy now.
We're getting it going here, man. But you know, the hits just keep on coming. I was watching the Joe Rogan Mixed Martial Arts podcast, episode 14, with the immortal Matt Brown.
Snoop Dogg, watch out.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, this is no news to me. Matt Brown doesn't like Snoop Dogg. I actually wrote a piece for Cage Side Press a while back when I spoke to Matt Brown.
Great piece, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Check it out, guys, at Cage Side Press if you want to read about it. But yeah, Matt Brown does not like Snoop Dogg. I bring it up because the story that Matt Brown told about how he got into mixed martial arts was not only was it super entertaining and hilarious, but it reminded me very much of a gentleman that we spoke with recently, Shane Kruchten, his story about how he got into the sport. And, you know, he could tell it a whole lot better than I can. So here is Shane Kruchten. Right now I want to welcome Shane Kruchten, the War Rhino. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Doing good, man. I appreciate you doing this, Shane. You know, I know that you're a busy man lately. I don't know if a lot of people know, though, Shane. You've been fighting professionally, brother, for over 10 years now. You have a record of 12-4. What's next for you? Are you still under contract with Bellator?
Yeah, currently still under contract right now. I'm under medical suspension, but you know, taking care of a couple things, and then hopefully get back in there. I want to try getting back in Bellator cage before the end of the year, so we'll see if that can happen.
Very cool. What camp are you working with nowadays?
10th Planet San Diego and Team Hurricane Awesome. So I'm down here in San Diego with Liz Carmouche and Alima McFarlane. So we're down here pushing forward every day.
I actually just started recently at 10th Planet here in Lombard, Illinois, with Omar Ocasio. So very cool, man.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, we're the Freak Brothers down here. The Freak Brothers got us, Gio and Boogie.
Those guys are legit jiu-jitsu practitioners, no doubt. Gio especially. You're seeing his name pop up more and more everywhere, you know?
Oh, it's nonstop. 2 years ago, ADCC, 4th place in the world. Boogie man just won combat EBI. So Alima Lay put her name on the map. She's now a world champion for Bellator. So, you know, and then you got, you know, the old war dogs, if you would, me and Liz still pushing forward. Wyatt Watson just retired, UFC vet. I mean, we got a heck of a team down here that just keeps growing, you know, and it's just nonstop.
Shane, man, I was reading a story about you by Dennis Lin. It was from the San Diego Union Tribune. It was about your old days, man, in Wisconsin. It had to do with fighting. You were in a bar. I was hoping you could kind of tell me if it was. Is that story true?
Yeah, that's a 100% accurate truth. It's fucking crazy, man. So in 2005, I was medically retired out of the Marine Corps. A little bit later that year.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, absolutely. Later that year, I fell into drugs and depression real bad, survivor's guilt issues and whatnot. And I blew up to about 260 plus pounds. I remember the day pretty vividly. I had just gotten done eating. I was probably 5 or 6 drinks in. And my buddy calls me and goes, "Do you want to go to some MMA fights?" And I said, "MMA." And I was kind of lopsided in my head. I was like, "MMA? Wait, I think I've seen that on TV." And so, I mean, at the time, Tito Ortiz and BJ Penn were just killing everybody on the scene. And Chuck Liddell was starting his reign. And I was like, okay. I was like, sure, yeah, let's go to that show. So I went to it, and I remember walking in. It was in the back of this bar, and there was just a boxing ring set up. And I sat down and had a couple drinks in my hand, and this guy walks up and he goes, "You look like a big dude." I was like, "Yeah, what about it?" He goes, "You ever fight?" And I was like, "Yeah, I fought before." Stupid. I'm 260 plus pounds. I'm pretty well on my way to, just really bad inebriation at the time. And he goes, "Hey, listen, I'll give you a $500 bar tab. I'll give you a pair of shorts. Get in there and fight." And I was like, "Okay, easy." And got in there and I fought 15 minutes, man, a heavyweight. And that was my first introduction into MMA, and I ended up winning a decision. So it wasn't pretty. We were the only decision of the night, and we were the heavyweights. So I'm not saying that it was, it was very lackluster at best, probably. But I won.
That's a great story, man. And you won your first bout. How about that with no professional training, really?
I not even really. I didn't even have anything. I had some basic Marine Corps stuff and years of wrestling. That's all I had to really use, and that's what I used for the fight.
Man, I love it. And you mentioned you were in the Marine Corps. I'm a big fan of artwork, tattoos, and whatnot. I'm on my way to completing my first full sleeve myself. Couldn't help but notice some of your artwork, and you have a memorial of sorts on your back, right?
Correct. Yeah, I have a tattoo down my back. It's all 19 men that I served with that were killed in action. I ended up getting the tattoo in 2009 after I tried to kill myself. I got it as kind of I always had their 6, and now they're going to have my 6 the rest of my life. And I couldn't let them down. So I had to put their names on my back, so that way I always have something to keep driving forward for.
Man, that's really cool, brother. I appreciate that. And thanks again for your service. I can't wait to see what Bellator's got in store for you next. We didn't get to see too much of you in your last fight, I know that you have a lot more to show. You're 12-4. You've been doing this for a long time. And Aaron Pico, that fucking kid is the real deal. So no shame in that,
Yeah, and like you said, there's no shame, and it just sucks that with that many pro fights and you get stunned or you get staunched that fast. It's almost an embarrassment. I mean, I have I don't even know on my record. I got a 6 or 9 second victory before, so I could only imagine what that kid went through. Mm-hmm. And I was always saying I would never be on the wrong side of a highlight reel, and here I was. I'm on the wrong side of a damn internet viral highlight reel. There's videos now and memes made about me. It is what it is. At the end of the day, I just smile. And last night I actually got a text message from one of my mentors coming up in the sport, Pat Spate, old Affliction Fight, Strikeforce guy. He texted me and he goes, "Listen," he goes, "I hope you have your head high after that loss." And I text him back, a question mark. I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Listen, when you're around the sport for this long and you've been fighting this long, you're bound to lose a fight. Getting starched that fast, you're bound to, but you only get the chance to get starched if you actually get in there and put the work in, and you're willing to go toe to toe with another human." And I was thinking, holy crap, he's right. So like you said, 12-4 isn't a shame record. I mean, I got nothing to hold my head low about. I can only pick my head up and push forward. And people are gonna, in my next fight, I am moving up in weight class. I'm no longer going to be at 145. So you're gonna see a much healthier, much more prepared fighter coming up. And Aaron Pico's a gangster. I got to give my credit to him. He will be a world champion. I've been hit by numerous people. I've been hit by, I fought Luke Zacharich, Gerald Mershard. I fought killers, and I've never been hit as hard as I've been hit by that left hook from Aaron Pico.
And for the people questioning that, they've probably never been hit in the fucking liver.
Well, not even liver. Like, you got hit in the liver twice, and the first hit he hit me with, if you guys notice in the fight, the first one he hit me, people couldn't really see it because it was kind of like a looping liver shot. I buckled because it broke my ribs. The second one hit me dead in the button. I was still stunned when I stood up to go toe to toe with him. After Mike Beltran stood us up. But I'm a fighter. I'm a prize fighter that's willing, kill or be killed, and I'm willing to go out on my shield if that's what it takes. So there's no way I wasn't answering Mike Beltran telling us to stand up and go face to face again. So
you mentioned too that you're going to go up in weight class, and I'm glad. I was going to ask you about that too, because it says you're like 6'1". You're a pretty damn big 145er.
Yeah, I know. I've fought in every weight class from heavyweight all the way to 145. The only weight class I haven't fought at that I would take a short notice fight for would be 170. Because that's the only weight class I haven't fought in, man. Otherwise, I'd fill it all in. That would kind of be a good storybook ending to my career. But it is what it is. I just really need to. I need to move up. I'm in my 30s. And if you look at my pictures, man, even King Mo, he's a really close friend of mine, as is Tito Ortiz. And both of them stopped me outside the cage, and they're like, dude, you look like you were still cutting weight in the ring, in the cage. And I was like, they're like, you did not look healthy. My body was freaking out. I actually dropped from day of weigh-ins. I ate a bunch of food and hydrated well. I was 168 when I went to bed. And when I woke up on fight day, I was 160. Wow. I floated almost 8 pounds. So that's your body freaking out, Yeah. I couldn't gain weight, man. I couldn't gain weight to save my own life.
Yeah, I think lightweight's going to do you better. You have a frame for a lightweight fighter. I think that's going to do you a lot better, for sure.
Correct.
For sure.
I agree.
Well, I can't wait to see what Bellator has planned for you next, man. I'd love to have you on maybe before your next fight.
For sure, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Real quick before I almost forgot, we have this little tradition kind of here that we do. Could you say this is Shane Kruchten and you're listening to the Did You See That Shit podcast?
All right. Hey, everybody, this is Shane Kruchten, and you're listening to Did You See That Shit podcast.
Oh, man. I want to give a huge shout out to Shane. Thank you for being on the podcast. Man, he weighed 260. Mm-hmm. Holy cow.
And just, in his own words, like, he was pretty much just there to be inebriated. And, look at him now. Now he's a legit fighter. That's amazing.
I'm going to the gym after that now.
Shane's a good dude, man. I can't wait to have him back on the show. So, UFC 225. Finally, we get something in Chicago, and I'm hoping we get more than CM Punk versus Mike Jackson. That's kind of the rumor right now. It looks like it might happen, man. We caught up with a guy who's been very gracious to me, Belal Muhammad. Remember the name. He's been on the show many times, and I had a chance to talk with him. He trains with CM Punk up at Rufus Sports. So here's our little chat with Belal. Right now, I want to introduce UFC welterweight Belal Muhammad. What's going on, brother?
I'm going good. How about you, bro?
Another day, right? Curtis Blades, he's from Chicago here too. He said that he plans on people remembering the name, and got me thinking, Belal, is he trying to steal your name, man? Come on, what's going on?
Man, all these people trying to use my nickname, man. I don't know what's the matter with them.
Right?
Stipe tried to use his last fight, and he had to delete the tweet. I told him you can't be using that.
But of course, the moniker, remember the name, that's Belal Muhammad, and no one can steal that. Now, I wanted to ask you, man, you're a veteran. You've been in the UFC now. You've gone 4-2 in the UFC, 13-2 overall. What's next for you?
Man, just looking to keep working my way up close to the belt, man. Just want to get an exciting fight. Want to keep putting on exciting fights. I'm hoping to get a good opponent for my next one, a big name, hopefully. And trying to get on that Chicago card, man. They're coming to Chi-Town, definitely my type of place to be at. First time ever fighting in Chicago in the Illinois area my whole career, so that'd be cool to fight in the United Center.
June 9th is the first time that UFC is going to be here for a pay-per-view. So I was going to ask you about that. Of course, you said you'd love to get on that card. A guy that you train with, too, CM Punk, he's a bit in the news lately. Do you think he might be on that card, too?
Man, I'm thinking it would be. It makes the most sense. It's his hometown, and he's been training really hard and he's been working hard. So hopefully we'll be able to see both of us on that card.
You know, that's one of the things, man, that's really impressed me about Punk is that he didn't look too good in his first outing. But, you know, Gall is a guy that we've seen now. Gall's legit. Punk stuck with this, though. He doesn't have the notoriety that he did in professional wrestling, but he's still doing it. He's still grinding every day with you guys at Rufus Sport, right?
Yeah, exactly, man. Like, you have so many, everybody out here hating, saying that, oh, he looked bad, he looked this, he looked that. But you got to understand that Mickey Gall sat there and he beat 2 more UFC guys right after that. And then the fight he lost, he still looked good when he was on the ground. So, like, the ground is his game. And Punk just didn't have that type of fight where every single fighter in the UFC, everybody else, they had that guy that they were building themselves up against, where there was the first, they were 0-0 against an 0-0 guy, or 0-0 against probably like a 2-3 guy, just building your record up just to fight smarter fights. And he went there on the biggest show on a pay-per-view, and then he obviously fought a guy that's a brown belt. So, I mean, but it's only going to make him better. I feel like the ring rust is going to be out of there. The pressure is going to be off him now because he's already been in the cage. He felt it. And for everybody, their first fight in a cage is different, man. It's all nerve-wracking and everything. So I feel like it'll be a lot more comfortable this time around.
Yeah, definitely. Your last fight against Tim Means, I thought you looked really good. You took a split decision win, but were you satisfied with the way you performed?
Yeah, I was satisfied with the way I performed. It was one of those where the game plan was to go in there and wrestle him and just try to take him down. But when I got in there and I started striking with him, I felt like I could strike with him, and I felt like I'm good enough to strike with a striker or grapple with a grappler or wrestle with a wrestler. So when I went in there and I proved that I could stand up, which means one of the scariest strikers of the game, I was satisfied with the fact that I came out on top.
I thought you definitely did deserve the win, too. So that was a good fight, man. Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier, you're hoping for a big name for your next opponent. Has the UFC kind of thrown any names out there?
I haven't thrown anybody out there yet. I'm looking for a couple fights and probably next weekend. I'm hoping Mike Perry wins next weekend and I get Mike Perry. That'll be a perfect fight for me.
Oh, shit. Mike Perry and Belal Muhammad in Chicago? Oh, man, the roof will go off. That'd be crazy, man.
Yeah, man, they put that as the main event.
I'm going to be there, and I would love to be sitting cage side for you guys going at it. That'd be a hell of a war, man. Both you guys have styles that are very fan-friendly, let's say. The pressure you bring and Perry's presence, man, that'd be a fucking fun fight. What's your current contract situation? How many more fights do you have with the UFC?
Well, I just signed my new fight deal when I fought up Randy Brown. So I got 2 more fights left on this deal.
I'm glad they're taking care of you, man. You're one of those guys you're a blue-collar fighter. Fans love you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, man, I appreciate you letting me call in, and just hoping everybody is ready for UFC Chicago, man, because I'm trying to get on that show, and I'm ready to put on an exciting fight.
Yeah, I can't wait. Can you do me one favor, Belal? Kind of have a tradition here at the show. Could you say, this is Belal Muhammad, and you're listening to the Did You See That Shit podcast?
All right, sure. This is Belal Muhammad, and you're listening to Did You See That Shit podcast.
Man, it only took you one try. I appreciate it, man.
No problem, bro.
Thanks, Belal. Have a good one. Okay, so not only does CM Punk look like he might be on the card, but it looks like we may get a Belal Muhammad fight on that card. Could it be against Mike Perry?
I think that's a great fight. I would love to see what happens with Mike Perry.
Well, he needs to beat Max Griffin coming up here first in just a few weeks.
I think he can definitely win that fight, Mike Perry. And then
I'm going to hold you to that. It looks like we're going to have Max Griffin on in the next episode or two. So I'm going to hold you to that when we have him on.
You know, dang, man, now I'm going to be held to my... No, I actually do think Mike Perry's going to win that fight. Nothing against Griffin. I think, Mike Perry needs a win, and
he definitely does after that Ponzinibbio
fight. After that fight, he's going to come back. I'm a huge fan of Mike Perry, and it's nothing against Griffin. I think he's a great fighter.
Absolutely.
I just really think a guy like Mike Perry after a loss is the most dangerous.
For sure. He's been tweeting crazy about it. He's going to be refocused for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And, man, Belal Muhammad, I think he's underrated. Guys don't really mention him, but he brings just nonstop pressure. And the dude is a fighter, and I think one of the strongest points to Belal's game is how smart the dude is.
Oh, yeah.
That's very underrated in the sport.
I think the reason I kind of want Mike Perry to win, it makes the Muhammad fight and the Mike Perry fight a lot better.
Oh, yeah. And like Belal said, he's hoping Perry wins because if Perry loses, I don't think it really works.
No, it's kind of a meaningless fight for Muhammad.
If Perry loses, it's definitely
it's meaningless for him.
So I know a fight that you do like though is Woodley Diaz, and it's gaining a little bit more steam now. And Dana White said no way, it's bullshit. But oftentimes, more times than not, when he says something like that, it doesn't mean anything. Do you think it's going to happen?
You know what? I was feeling like it was going to happen for a while, but I'm really starting to lean towards no. And I think that Dos Anjos is going to be the next opponent.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. But then I had a chance to speak with Mike Dyce. He's one of my favorite mixed martial arts journalists. He's up there with Ariel Helwani, Luke Thomas. I think he's one of the very best in the game. He was very kind enough to spend a few minutes with us. So here's our conversation with Mike Dyce. So I want to introduce Mike Dyce. He, of course, is with SI and Fansided. And Mike always has the scoop. What's going on, Mike?
Not much. How are you doing?
Doing good, man. I appreciate you taking some time with me today. I know that you're a busy guy, and speaking of busy, in the last 24 hours or so, the UFC has announced or booked like 11 or so fights. Man, what do you make of this recent barrage of fight announcements?
I think given the circumstances surrounding UFC 222, it's kind of a little over sensationalized. It seems like they always kind of book in spurts like this. They'll schedule out kind of like a quarter of events or a year, half a year of events. And then it seems like a bunch of fight announcements kind of come really quickly in rapid succession. I just think the situation surrounding UFC 222 and Max Holloway being injured kind of exacerbated that because the status of that card was up in the air. So I don't know that it necessarily catches me off guard. And then, of course, once they figured out that domino, it kind of allowed other dominoes to follow suit, which is why you hear, Cyborg steps in to save UFC 222. Now all of a sudden Amanda Nunes is freed. And that's why we had a Raquel Pennington conversation surrounding UFC 224 in Brazil is happening. Once the first domino falls, the other things kind of seem to fall into place. And I think that kind of facilitates these rapid fighter agreements or fights being announced.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I think it makes sense. I mean, you get the first thing in place and then it all kind of falls into place. It makes a lot of sense there, Mike. You mentioned Cyborg stepping in to kind of save the day at 222. The casual fan is probably not very familiar with Kunitsaya. What can you tell us about her?
She's a bantamweight, which I think is the kind of thing that's going to stick out right away, is that Cyborg's been clamoring for wanting to build out this featherweight division. And I mean, she's fought at featherweight before, but I think she's known primarily as a bantamweight. And I think that's kind of the frustrating part that it's going to be for fans once again, is I think once the promotion kind of happens, and, as the card draws near, it's Cyborg fighting another bantamweight. And I think it's going to ultimately be whether or not fans are interested in seeing Cyborg potentially run through someone really quickly again. It's a kind of the Ronda Rousey, Mike Tyson effect, where people want to see people lose really quickly. But it keeps the thing on. I think in that card in particular, the Brian Ortega and the Frankie Edgar fight is going to be the really interesting one to watch.
Yes, that's a really fun fight. Now, what do you think of that? I mean, is Frankie this guy who is kind of been the guy that is in charge, I guess, of turning back these like Yair Rodriguez, and he's done it with a handful of guys. Is Ortega that next guy he turns back, or do you think Ortega is the guy that can kind of figure out Frankie Edgar?
That's the you summed up basically Frankie Edgar's career right there. Especially particularly at featherweight, it seems like he gets into the title mix, he gets a title shot, he doesn't win or something happens, and then he ends up fighting, the top contenders or guys who could eventually fight for the title, and he ends up turning them away again quickly. And so, it's interesting to see what happens. Every time it seems like they book one of these, you mentioned Yair Rodriguez for one, that it's kind of, is this guy going to be the guy who stops Frankie Edgar? And Brian Ortega, for everything that's great about him, he doesn't have necessarily the experience that Frankie Edgar has. But eventually Frankie Edgar, Father Time's going to catch up with him, and then that becomes a factor. And it doesn't look like Frankie Edgar has hit that point yet. So I don't think that Brian Ortega is necessarily given to challenge Frankie Edgar for it. But it's foolish at this point to think that Brian Ortega can stop Frankie Edgar. But of course, we saw Brian Ortega in his last fight with some very slick submission work, being able to do a whole lot of things. I don't know if Frankie Edgar, for all his wrestling accolades, can adapt to that. But, I think going into it, you have to think Frankie Edgar is the favorite.
Yeah, I agree. Frankie is just one of my favorite fighters. He's just a fun guy to watch fight. He's a guy that people want to root for. A fight that really doesn't make much sense, but it's kind of gaining some traction, man, is the Diaz-Woodley fight. Is this going to happen?
Dana White came out and said it's not going to happen. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean it won't happen, as we all know. But, Diaz wants the fight. Woodley wants the fight. Why not? The UFC Chicago card's right there. They don't have anybody to headline that card. You have two All the other pay-per-views coming up, 224, which they announced like last weekend, they doesn't necessarily have a date or a main event, but it seems like Amanda Nunes as a Brazilian champion is kind of pegged to fill that role. People thought that was going to be when she fights Cyborg. So Chicago, you don't have necessarily a huge heavyweight champion star to headline that card with some kind of connection to the city outside of Woodley. Woodley trains in Milwaukee. He lives in St. Louis. He kind of bookends the city on major sides from their next biggest city. So it makes sense to have Woodley on that card. And if Nate Diaz is the fight that's going to happen, or if that's the fight that he wants, then why not steer into that? The other thing, too, is that the Chicago cards in the UFC have traditionally been a hard sell. When they had the on Fox ones in back-to-back Julys with Dillashaw Barao 2, and then the following year with Holm Shevchenko, they weren't sellouts. Granted, it was in July, and it can be really hot and humid in July in Chicago, so it can be unpleasant. And then before that, they were doing events in January. And living in Chicago, we know that January is not exactly a time. It doesn't necessarily deter Chicago natives, but it doesn't necessarily encourage them to get out either. So moving it up in June a little bit, the weather should be a little bit nicer. But Woodley, I think, is a big draw to put on that card. And if the Diaz fight, if you add Diaz, that's another compelling star. And I think that'll intrigue fans. And I think that could be the kind of turning point for UFC events in Chicago. Woodley by himself might run into the same problems that Dillashaw Barao did and that was a title fight, even though it was on Fox. Woodley there by himself might run into those same issues, but you add the Diaz element to it, that I think takes it over the top and can kind of salvage the Chicago, which is a major market for the UFC.
Man, you just about said it all right there. Of course, I'm in Chicago, and I would love nothing more to have, Diaz Woodley here. I was going to ask you about the Chicago card because it's the first ever pay-per-view that they're doing here. And I was hoping we were going to get more than just CM Punk, So
Yeah.
Woodley Diaz would be the fight. Turning to this weekend, though, man, UFC 221, a lot of people are saying this is the worst pay-per-view in history. Would you go that far?
No. UFC 208 wasn't that long ago, lest we forget. That was, of course, when Holm fought Jermaine Duranamy for the inaugural featherweight champion. Of course, Jermaine won and then got stripped. I mean, that card was a less than stellar card, and I think it was, Anderson Silva was on that card, and he fought Derek Brunson, and he won, and it was controversial. So, I wouldn't go as far as saying that this is the worst card ever. It's definitely super top heavy. Like Luke Rockhold, if you compare the cards side by side, Luke Rockhold versus Yoel Romero that's a matchup that I think all MMA fans want to see. And it's for an interim title. It sucks that it's not Robert Whittaker, but I think that's intriguing and it can kind of balance out. It's definitely top heavy, and the rest of the pay-per-view card isn't something to necessarily aspire to, but it's better than other cards they've had. It's not the greatest card. It's not an average pay-per-view card either, but it's definitely not the worst.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it too. The Luke Rockhold and Romero fight, that's one of the 2 or 3 best fights you can make in the middleweight division. And the Curtis Blades Mark Hunt fight, that has a lot of intrigue to me as well too. Other than that, I could maybe take it or leave it. But let me ask you, if you're speaking to the hardcore fans and you're kind of looking up and down at this weekend's card, what's a fight that you would say maybe isn't getting the publicity it should, but we should kind of keep an eye out for?
You just mentioned the Mark Hunt versus Curtis Blades fight, and Curtis Blades is a guy who's from Chicago who could very well end up on that Chicago pay-per-view too, depending on how it comes out of this. But, it's crazy to think the selling point of this fight in Australia was Robert Whittaker fighting on this card. And then you have Mark Hunt on the card, and it seems like he's been hardly promoted and discussed at all. So much focus is centered around Rockhold and Yoel Romero at the top. But Curtis Blades is also a guy who's only ever lost once in the UFC, and it was to Francis Ngannou. And if I'm remembering correctly, it was like a doctor stoppage between rounds. Like, he didn't get knocked out. Like, the doctor stopped the fight. And up until the Stipe Miocic fight, that was the toughest fight Francis Ngannou had, was against Curtis Blades. And he's got a wrestling background. He's going against Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt's always said he wants clean fighters, and Curtis Blades appears to be, by all means, clean. So it's an intriguing matchup, and maybe this is like a residual from his feuds with the UFC Mark Hunt over all the PED users who fought the Alistair Overeems and the Brock Lesnar's and stuff. So maybe that's why it's underpromoted. But I think that's one is certainly to keep your eye on. Otherwise, there's intriguing local talent, and that's what they do on these cards. And I think as a hardcore fan, if you want to sell it to them, it's just a chance to see a lot of up and coming guys who you don't see that often or are kind of under the radar, and you have that kind of knowledge to be ahead of the step of other MMA fans when they finally get that push. I wish Dan Hooker was on this card. I think that would have been a really intriguing matchup. But, like Ross Pearson's on this card. That's an intriguing, person to watch. He struggled, but, you could say he's fighting for his UFC career. There's intriguing matchups, but,
Absolutely. I agree with you, man. The Curtis Blades fight. Man, if only they would have been able to get Hooker. I don't know if he's injured or what, but Hooker, man, in his last outing against Pearson that you mentioned, he looked phenomenal. I mean, Hooker looks like he could be the next guy from that geographical area to take that step.
Yeah, and I remember when he was at UFC 192, fighting at UFC 192 in Houston, that was the Daniel Cormier Alexander Gustafsson card. He was sitting at media day and nobody was talking to Danny Hooker. He was just sitting there by himself. Nobody, he was a relative newcomer. Of course you're at the media day and there's big names Juliana Pena was there and all these other people, Daniel Cormier, for instance, and Alexander Gustafsson. So he's kind of overlooked, but to see his rise I think he would have been a really intriguing person to have on the card, but things don't always work out.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, I know after listening, everybody's going to want to, if they don't already, everybody's going to want to follow you on social media. How can everybody find you?
It's easy. Mike Dyce, basically all social media accounts, DYCE.
Very good. I like to keep it easy too. It's just not so much for everybody, but for me,
Right, exactly.
I appreciate it, Mike. Anything else you'd like to add?
Just thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate you thinking of me and inviting me to come on. I enjoyed talking to you.
Absolutely, man. I think you're absolutely one of the best in the business, and I'd love to have you on again.
Absolutely, anytime.
Take care, Mike.
You too.
All right, so you can see now he just opened up a whole possibility of what could be in Chicago here.
I definitely learned a lot. Speaking of insiders like that, and I'm very upset I wasn't able to be here for that one as well. But, man, speaking to an insider like that, you definitely learned a lot. And I'm really hope he's right about the Curtis Blades. If everything goes right, I'm a huge fan of Curtis. No offense to Mark Hunt. I love Mark Hunt as well, but Curtis got to represent Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
If Curtis Razor Blades can win and get on that Chicago card unscathed,
yeah, that's something I didn't even think about.
That's going to be a pretty nice card.
The chances of him getting out of that Hunt fight, though, with a minimal suspension or no medical suspension is very slim. That's Mark Hunt. I think it can't happen, and I hope, I wish Curtis the best of luck, but, man, that'd be great to have him on that card, though. UFC 221, though, that is right around the corner. That's right upon us here. Rockhold Romero. Really solid main event, and the co-main event of Mark Hunt and Blades that we were just talking about, that's a solid fight too. But other than that, it's kind of weak, right?
I'm gonna say I would prefer this if it is a pay-per-view. Do not have an interim fight in there.
Why? Well, the new regime has to have a title in every pay-per-view.
I know, but I'm really having an issue with that because now
lots of people are.
It's taking away the fun of the sport.
It's watering it down.
It's really watering it down. Interim belts I felt were only for if a guy was out for more than a year.
It's what it generally should be. Yeah.
Yeah, we just had a middleweight title fight.
It was an interim title fight. No, GSP took it from Bisping, and then he gave it up, and then they took the interim championship that was Whitaker's and promoted that to the real belt. So it's just a game. It's a stupid game that they're playing with these fake belts. It doesn't make sense. But who do you think wins the fight?
Yoel. I'm giving you. Here's my problem. I like Luke Rockhold's style. I love who he trains with. I don't like Luke.
Well, I'm not a Luke fan either, but I think he wins the fight.
And here's why. But I think his problem is his cockiness.
He's definitely rubs people the wrong way.
And no, it's in the cage. He gets caught a lot. A lot of guys he's fought haven't been able to put him down because of lack of power. But when he got caught by Bisping, it really showed me that he can get caught, and if he's a guy who's powerful enough like Yoel, and Yoel has been through, he's a guy who's able to be rocked and still be powerful.
Yeah, I think he got caught in the Bisping fight because he didn't really respect Bisping, and he didn't really, he didn't respect the guy.
I don't think he respects any people he fights.
I definitely think he respects Yoel's power. So we disagree on that one. I think we agree on the next one. I like Blades,
and I think it's going to be decision.
I think that's probably how it will get them too. I don't really see Curtis submitting or knocking out Mark. I think I see him being more active. The only thing that concerns me here is if it is a close fight, Mark Hunt might get the hometown decision here. That kind of is in the back of my mind. So, then you got this guy, Tia Tiavasu and Cyril Asker. Tia Tiavasu is a guy that has really, really good hands for a heavyweight. Not too many guys really know who he is. He put a beating on Rashard Coulter, who is just a warrior. Tia Tiavasu, I think, could be the next real big star from New Zealand after Mark Hunt goes. I think he takes care of Asker.
I think he is a part of that new wave, and since the heavyweight division is very, very slim, he can easily become a star in that division.
Especially in that region, yeah, for sure. So you like him too, then?
I definitely like him. He has great hands.
And I think we differ here. You like Jake Matthews, I think, and I like Jingling Lee.
Only reason is because Jake Matthews was on that huge winning streak a while back. He got starched against Kevin Lee, and he hasn't quite been the same since that fight. But I think he can get back to his old form.
Yeah, definitely. Matthews is a stud, man. You know, I really like Lee, though, because think like Camacho, the guy we just saw fight on Fox. He's constant forward pressure. He takes shots. You can rock him, but he just goes forward. And I don't know. I just think he can outwork him. Again, maybe if it's a close fight, I can see them giving it to the hometown guy, Matthews here. The pay-per-view gets kicked off with Tyson Pedro against Sarapak Sarov. Now, Pedro was a guy I was really high on, and he kind of let me down last fight. Took a step back. I think he fixes those issues, and I think he gets back on track here. I like Pedro. He's got some gnarly tattoos.
I'm with you on Pedro, and the main reason I just don't know much about the other guy.
At least you're honest, right?
Yeah, and I feel bad. It's just this card is a lot of no names, but I'm excited as a hardcore fan when there's not a lot of people I know, because I get introduced to new guys, which is a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, and as Mike Dyce was saying, man, like they usually load these foreign cards with a lot of local talent, so this is in that same kind of mold, but I'm sure it'll be a decent card, man. There's going to be some good fights on there for sure. I think one that a lot of people are kind of maybe sleeping on is Alexander Volkanovski against Jeremy JCB Kennedy. Volkanovski is 16-1. Kennedy is 11-0. Something's got to give. I think Volkanovski is the guy to beat Jeremy Kennedy. But yeah, Volkanovski is someone to look out for. JCB, he's a Canadian. He's a really young kid, and he's very talented. I just think Volkanovski may be a little bit too much too soon for him.
You know what? I'm excited to be introduced to Volkanovski. I've seen him fight a couple times, but you keep raving about him, so I want to see what he can do.
And then in unrelated news, John Fitch, man, I guess he's done with the Professional Fighters League, and he's in talks with Scott Coker and Bellator. This is good. I think this is really good. And all of a sudden, man, if he signs their welterweight division,
scariest welterweight division.
So you think it is better than UFC's welterweight division?
You know what? I don't think that their top guy is better than the top guy in UFC, but I think
Rory?
that
You don't think Rory's better than Woodley? He's already beat him.
I think that their top.
I think Rory's better than Woodley.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I think it's a really good fight.
It's a good fight.
I think Woodley's gotten a lot better.
So I think it's a really good fight. But but think about it. If Fitch goes there. And then, oh man, wouldn't that be great if, I know Ben Askren said he'd only come out for the best of the best in like a George fight, but if he gets Ben Askren over there, you got John Fitch, Ben Askren, Lima, McDonald, Gegard Basasi, you could drop down the ones. I mean, you got a legit Larkin, you got a legit group of killers over there.
So what I'm basically saying though, the Bellator welterweight, their top 5 is better than the top 5 at UFC. Their top 5 in Bellator is better than the top 5 at UFC.
Could be, definitely could be pretty close to
as
it.
A collective. Like I feel like holding the belt there is not going to be. You're not going to hold it for long.
No, definitely not. It reminds me of something my grandma used to say.
It's time